On today's show, we're going to dig a little deeper into the subject of deception. What is real and what is fake? And is it possible that even now you're being deceived?
What is the long-term effect of too much information? If you're sitting there and you're thinking it's the gospel.
Is it just me, or does it seem like it's hard to trust anyone these days?
Our country is under siege from a media carpet bombing campaign.
We put up this facade. We all know it's not real.
Can't you tell when somebody's telling you a big lie?
You liar!
It's unnerving to wake up each morning and not know who is telling the truth.
Alternative facts.
He wasn't lying, he gave alternative facts.
The epidemic of malicious fake news.
Fake news.
Fake news.
Story by the fake news.
This is fake news.
Represents fake news.
Fake news awards.
This idea of fake news.
Manipulating the trending news section.
We take down and block 450,000 suspicious logins every day.
To tell people what they can or cannot read, or further, what they can or cannot believe.
Deep down, I just want to believe in something that is true.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Do you all want to know the truth? Are you ready for the truth? To continue on this subject, we have a very special guest here today, one that many would credit for coining the term fake news, Donald Trump, the President of the United States. Mr. President, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Now, you're very active on social media.
My Twitter following is, I guess, between Facebook, Twitter, et cetera, we have 22 million people. But I will tell you, there's a lot of emotion on that issue.
We've already had an African-American president. We almost had a female. Do you think we'll see a woman president soon?
We're going to have a woman president, absolutely. Probably won't be very long, but...
I think that's all we need.
All right, cut.
All right, people, that's a wrap.
Hey, thanks, man. I still don't think this is a good idea. People just want to be entertained. They don't really want the truth.
Where is your courage?
It's at home sleeping with my paycheck.
Unless you stand for something, you'll fall for anything.
I like that. Can I tweet that?
As leader, damaging the
I'm
party's
really
chance.
surprised the BBC is reporting fake news.
Well,
there is no news.
What I'd like,
With so much fake news, I don't know what's real and what's not. I don't know what to believe anymore.
You're not alone. Everybody wants to believe in something. It's the core of humanity. Pew's Global Forum actually did some research recently, and they found that 84% of the world are religious. At the core of understanding what truth is, it's really a question of who and what do I trust?
How do you even decide who or what to even trust?
There's an interesting report by Edelman, which has nearly 2 decades of research on trust. They've found, for example, that media as a global institution is the least trusted entity right now, the first time in its nearly 2 decades of research. They found that nearly 7 in 10 people worry about fake news being used as a weapon. As we physically interact, there are cues we take from each other. But think about this. What about online? There are no physical cues. When a large part of communication is non-verbal, in other words, us assessing each other, online, that doesn't exist anymore. And so distinguishing between what is true and false now becomes a problem of information and knowledge. And that's where, if you pair that together with like-minded groups, it becomes even more difficult now with a group mentality, with a peer pressure approach, to actually distinguish and make the right decision between what is true and what is false.
So is social media to blame for all the fake news out there?
Social media by itself is not necessarily dangerous, but it's how it can be used that can cause a lot of difficulties, a lot of problems. There are over 2 billion users on Facebook alone. There's 1 billion users on YouTube. That accounts for 1/3 of internet use. And with the manipulation of images, of video, this disinformation can spread like wildfire. Information overload can actually cause and make us vulnerable to manipulation.
So can you expand on this idea of conformity a little more?
There's a classic social psychology study undertaken by Solomon Asch in 1951, which set in motion research around the idea of conformity.
The experiment you'll be taking part in today involves the perception of lengths of lines, and on each card there are several lines. Your task is a very simple one. You're to look at the line on the left and determine which of the 3 lines on the right is equal to it in length.
Only one of the people in the group is a real subject, the 5th person with the white t-shirt. The others are confederates of the experimenter and have been told to give wrong answers on some of the trials.
2.
2.
2.
2.
2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
2. 2. 2. I know they're wrong, but why should I make waves?
2. In this case, the subject knows he is right, but goes along to avoid the discomfort of disagreeing with the group.
People willingly conform to an idea, even though it was clearly and blatantly incorrect, because of peer pressure, because the other participants were actually agreeing with something that was incorrect. Take, for example, image manipulation, right? You do this on a regular basis, I'm sure. Do you take selfies? Do you take pictures? You put it through an app. Maybe you want to lighten something. Maybe it's too dark in some areas. Those are acceptable forms. We want to get the best looking image that we can so we can share it with friends, with family, and so on. But image manipulation itself can actually fall into a dangerous category. In the wrong hands, it can actually be used to deceive.
Another really egregious example of manipulation is the Los Angeles Times photo from 2003, where a photographer took 2 photos. They were both quite dramatic. There was a British soldier in the photo and there was an Iraqi civilian. In one photo, he liked the way the soldier looked, and in the other photo, he liked the way the civilian looked. So he decided to just combine the 2 photos in Photoshop. And it was actually printed all over the world.
Photo manipulation is as old as photography itself. Take this photo of President Lincoln. It's actually Lincoln's head on Senator John Calhoun's body.
We've had faked photos for decades. This hugely damaging image of John Kerry supposedly sharing a stage with Vietnam protester Jane Fonda was actually a composite of 2 images.
But image manipulation is just the beginning. Think about audio now.
So as you can see, we have the audio waveform above it, and we have the text under it.
And I kissed my dogs and my wife.
So suppose Michael Key wants to send this audio to his wife. So he actually wants his wife to go before the dogs. So, and
I kissed my wife and my dogs.
Wait, here's more, we can actually type something that's not here. So we can actually type small phrases. So let's say, okay, so we remove those words and we do 3 times.
Oh!
And playback.
And I kissed Jordan 3 times.
Think about video. Now you have an opportunity to attack all the senses. Deepfake technology.
Their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City.
This is the ability to deceive you and I on a level that is unprecedented. It's essentially off-the-shelf technology that you and I can easily access, and we can not only manipulate a photo, but we can actually manipulate videos to an extent that can fool the senses.
I think it's real important.
Here we go. President Barack Obama. When you're giving a speech, make sure you use...
You and I are going to find it very difficult, if not near nigh impossible, to actually tell the difference between what is real and what is not real. You have an opportunity now to deceive people on a global scale.
Fake video begins. People believe in ghosts and spirits. Fake news threatens democracy. How do you know this? What connects the dots?
Turn off the recorder. Do you believe the devil exists? I know who you are. I know that you believe that everything's good, that you've got all the things that you need to satisfy your life. The home, the car, the friends, the social media, the money, the power, the drugs that you're using to fill your life with, because you know that there's a void. There's something in there that's still missing in your life that you need to fill. But what do you really want to fill that void with? I've been there. I've seen it. I've enjoyed it. I've been a part of hobnobbing with the upper class, the elite.
Now, I get what you're saying, but tell me how you found your way out. What do you want me to understand?
I want you to understand that you've got a choice at the end of the day. You can go down one of two paths. They lead in two opposite directions. There's so much opportunity to really find the truth in all this noise that's around us. There was a time where I started looking for answers. And it's there when you start looking for those answers that you can actually find two different narratives. And in that you have to make a choice on which narrative you're going to, or which path you're going to walk down to find the truth.
So how do you separate the narratives? How did you know truth from lies?
I had to go back and re-examine where I came from. And once I knew where I came from, then I realized the path that I was on. I was in pursuit of the truth. It was a journey. It's not something that just the light turned on and off overnight. There were doors I had to go through and close. There were lives that I couldn't look back upon. And there was a journey to find the truth in all of this noise.
So the doors you're closing, are you referring to people or relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. Careers too. I've walked away from friends and family who I thought were really important and close to me, but in reality they were people that were not only deceived as I was, but they were deceivers. I mean, I've come to the realization that people make their choices based upon their environment, and because of that, those choices may not always be the right choices, but I'm not the one that's going to judge them on that.
So you refer to a time where you were deceived. Do you want to talk about that experience at all?
Well, I was raised at a very young age to tap into an inner power, to invoke powers that were inherent in me. And I believed that that was the purpose of who I am. And in doing so at a young age, I got involved in different types of transcendental meditation. I was being trained how to take these gifts of clairvoyance, telekinesis, projections, and even levitation.
Wow, how old were you?
I was an early teenager.
Do you think that that was a vulnerable age or time for you?
I had no fear. No fear whatsoever. It was what I was expected to do on the journey. But that was the beginning that formed my opinions and my frame of reference on the world.
Mark, tell me about your upbringing. How did you grow up?
I grew up in a family, generationally, that wanted to teach their children religious enlightenment, that you could invoke an inner power and you could have godlike qualities here on earth.
Invoke, like as in possession, or what does that mean?
Well, now I look at it in hindsight, yes, but before it was more of taking time through transcendental meditation, Kundalini yoga, and unleashing the dragon within, and climbing the chakras, looking for that crown chakra of enlightenment, that I may obtain certain gifts of being able to project myself through thoughts or levitate. Those were things that were gradually groomed into me that I could become like a god.
Do you remember that moment where you had a change of thinking?
It wasn't until I was much older and I was well into my career like you are. I was at the pinnacle of my career working for a global company, making a lot of money, rubbing elbows with very important people, and involved in business that I couldn't even talk about. And it's at that point that that pit in my stomach said that there's something missing. And that's where, out of my self, God stepped into the picture.
So a lot of these things may sound really tempting to most people. What is the downside?
When I came to the realization where that power was coming from, that it wasn't inherently in me, but it was a power outside of myself wanting to be in me.
So where was it coming from, an evil place or a dark place?
Originally, I didn't think so. I thought that the light was beautiful. I thought those who were in the light were beautiful, ascended masters. Just as my generation before me and my generation before them had always wanted to attain this level of Mahatma. That I don't need a physical body anymore, that I can have a body that is made of a spirit. And that body can be used collectively, consciously, to try to bring this world into a harmonious setting for all of mankind. Those were things that I thought were compelling for me to chase.
Sounds compelling. What is the downside?
The prince of this world was the one that was behind that pursuit. He was the one that was trying to bring about this idea that you can communicate with the dead, that you can have relationships in regards to your abilities and invoke these things, but in reality, those are things that were taking me over.
You said you were living in the light, and it sounded like darkness. Clearly, you were deceived. How did you find your way out?
I worked with a fellow who we were out one night having dinner, and he was heading up to his hotel room that night, and I asked him kind of nonchalantly, what are you going to go do? Go read your email or do some work? And he said, no, I'm going to go read a Bible. And I said, that's interesting. Okay. And that was a seed that he planted. And from that seed that got planted that evening, it actually generated and sprung into a root. That pit that was missing in my stomach, he actually grabbed onto it and said, there is something about that Bible that Bobby mentioned that you need to go find out about.
So had you read the Bible before?
I'd never picked up a Bible in my life. I was actually to the point when that seed sprouted. I was driving one day in my car and went by a bookstore, and I literally turned the car around and I was compelled to go inside and talk to the storekeeper about buying a Bible. And he said, Mark, I don't have any. I'm going to have to order you one. So absolutely, I ordered a Bible. And I still have that Bible with me today.
What was it like reading the first few pages?
At first, it was a journey of curiosity. There's so much in the first few pages of the creation. But there was something that was driving me intrinsically inside, that there is truth in this word. And it drove me to keep reading and keep reading and keep reading. And on the flip side, here I was still struggling with my career, what I knew was the other part of my life, the people I was involved in. And there was a battle going on inside between truth and error. Being deceived on the one side and the light of truth trying to come in and break through that darkness that was coming in.
Do you think people could feel, either people at work or your family could feel the conflict inside of you?
Absolutely. It came to a tipping point where I literally told my boss that I can't do this anymore. And that's when my career ended abruptly.
Did people think you were crazy or?
Not at first. They didn't understand that the balance of it all, because as I was starting to be driven to read the Word of God, I wanted to know what the world I came from. And in doing so, I pursued information on the internet, looking for truth. And I kept drilling down. And as I drilled down, I realized I was almost like Alice in Wonderland. I had tumbled down into this rabbit hole. And I realized I had to balance what was going on in my life, that there was this battle going on between what the prince of this world wanted me in his grasp and the Creator wanted me in his hand. And ultimately I came to the point of having to tell my family of the decisions that I had made. I searched numerous churches, and as I was in their meetings and congregations, There was things that were resonating me when I read the Bible and the truths that I found in the Bible, and particularly the truth of the Ten Commandments. And I kept asking the question over and over again, why aren't you keeping the Sabbath day holy? Why is it that Sunday is the day that you prefer, or that you believe that God has appointed his day of worship? They were deceived to believe that. You see, this prince of this world, he's also known as the sun god. And the sun god wants his day of worship. And ultimately, when the end of this controversy, this battle takes place, it's going to be between those who keep his law and those who keep the law of mankind. I believe that the truth has set me free, and in doing so, it created a huge divide in my family, with my siblings, my parents. In fact, because I had known too much, there was an evening, I had a camp that I bought through a family friend in upstate New York, a very secluded place. And as I was going through this process of quitting my career and realizing that I was going to be on a new trajectory of a life, a group of men showed up, and they wanted to take my life. At the back of my property, there was a lake, and across the lake was a state facility. And that night, that place was all lit up. And I was looking across the lake through a pair of binoculars, and all of these men dressed in full regalia.
Did you know them?
I knew who they were later. They decided that that night was my night to either intimidate me and put me through fear, and they came towards me in the property. But as I was looking in the binoculars, and I was panning this line of these men that were standing there, I realized that there was a pair of crosshairs looking at me through the binoculars. So my eye and the eye that was inside of that scope on that rifle was pointed right at my head. And I gave him a hand signal, and he gave me a hand signal back. And I literally dropped to my knees, and I said, Lord, I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but I'm in your hands. Tell me what to do. And he said, Mark, take your shoes and socks off, go outside, and tell him you belong to me. And I literally heard that still voice. I did what it told me to do. And through the power of God, I said, you can have my body, but you can't have my soul. I've given it to the Lord. So there was this perfect peace that came over me. And a small, still voice spoke inside me again and said, this is not your battle tonight, Mark. Go inside and go to bed. And I went inside the cottage. I laid down. I slept. I got up the next day. I went into the town, the little diner, and there were some of those same people sitting there in the diner the next morning. And I walked in there feeling like I was on cloud 9, that I had the Lord at my side, and that there was nothing that was going to happen to me at that point. And just about a day later, I got a phone call from my father. And in our conversation, he said, Mark, I'm going to give you a warning. If you get out from behind the shadow of God, you'll end up with a bullet in your head. I'm your father. I'm telling you this because you're my blood. And from that moment forward, he realized and said, we can't touch you anymore. Don't get out from behind his shadow. Best man in my wedding, my best friend. And we've come to realize that we serve two different masters. We're on different roads. I love my family. I love my parents dearly. But we've come to the realization that we're on two different ways.
Well, this is a lot. I'm going to take a moment. You don't mind if I excuse myself?
Not at all.
Okay.
The drugs. satisfy your
Turn
life.
off the recorder.
I still don't think this is a good idea.
Do you believe the devil exists?
You have an opportunity now to deceive people on a global scale.
There's something in there
Fake
that's still
news.
missing in your
And
life.
what do I trust?
So sorry. Just needed a minute.
No worries, no worries.
So clearly there's something going on when the church and the Bible are on two different pages.
Well, there are a lot of belief systems in the world today, but there's been a deception for a long time in regards to what is the truth of the Bible and what are the ideas of man, and why those ideas of man are being pushed on people who don't read their Bibles.
Where does the road divide?
Well, there's really two big errors. One is the idea of spiritualism, which I was talking about, talking to the dead, and that the Bible teaches the state of the dead is that they're asleep. And the other is the idea of worship, and what day is the day of worship that was commanded by God through His law and through His Word.
In an era of fake news, does the Bible speak to this?
It absolutely does. We're living in a time where we can't discern which is real and which is false. Right now, the earth is just perfectly primed to receive the greatest deception that's going to come to mankind. There have been deceptions long before this, deceptions that brought us into wars, deceptions that have brought down kingdoms. But ultimately, this last deception, that Lucifer, the devil himself, is one to set up the final kingdom here on earth. Lucifer, this angel of light, coming to mankind, that's going to be the great deception. And if we haven't filtered out all of this noise and have used the Word of God as our one true way of guiding us through all of this distraction, we're going to be taken in by his deceptions.
So how would people really be deceived by Lucifer? I mean, won't he have horns and a red tail going around doing evil things? How will people be deceived by that if he's so obviously bad?
In order to bring everybody under his control, he's going to have to come in as a beautiful being. He's going to become a healer. Some see him as the new Maitreya, the new Christ, the cosmic Christ that's going to come to heal the planet. So no, he's not going to be this guy holding a pitchfork and having red horns and having a legion of evil angels with him.
So this idea that we have that Lucifer is obviously evil is a misconception.
The two will look so similar, it will be nearly impossible to know the difference. In this deception that's going to take place at the end, only those who have been grounded in the truth will be able to see the deceiver in his disguise and be able to make the right decisions and the right choices of who they're going to give their allegiance to.
Mark, I have never heard anything like this before in my life.
It's going to be nearly impossible to tell the difference between the truth and this fake news. You're either going to love the truth or you're going to believe a lie. Don't look at this. It's a rabbit hole. Don't go down it. Look to your true north for the truth. You can find it in His Word.
I've learned so much on my journey. There's so much to think about. However, I have renewed hope that I can believe in something. I'll never forget what Mark said, that two can look so similar that you can hardly tell the difference.